So this story is loosely, very loosely, dedicated to a good friend of mine, the lovely Linda. She knows who she is. And there's Linda right there.
Hi, Linda.
Hi, Susie. So Linda is playing the role of Vinny's mother. And ain't no one going to mess with our Linda, I'll tell you. Dave and Vinny, Linda's visit. The Rampant Horse squatted at the edge of the Longcroft estate like it had learned to keep its head down. Its sign creaked whenever a train thundered past the railway lines opposite. And the car park bore the scars of generations of poor reversing decisions. Inside, though, it was warm, familiar, and smelled faintly of ale, bleach, and stale pork pies. Hi, Rowena. Amazon man, of course. Dave was already at the bar when Vinny pushed the door open. Scraps trotting in ahead of him like a scruffy little stout. You're early, Dave said, raising his pint. Bachelor's prerogative, Vinny replied. Dave nodded solemnly. Scraps sniffed the bar stool legs and sneezed. Ken the barman slid a pint towards Vinny without a word. His face looked like it had been carved out of disappointment and left to set. Cheerful as ever, Ken, Vinny said. Ken grunted. Don't start. Sandra appeared from behind the bar, carrying a tray of glasses, her expression already preloaded with sarcasm. Vinny, she said, your dog's eyeing up my ankles again. If he starts humping me, there will be hell to pay. He's a romantic, Vinny replied. Takes after lecherous Lee. Thank you, Susie. Right on cue, Lee leaned in from the end of the bar. His grin slick with confidence. Thank you for the likes, Ruth. Speaking of romance, Lee said, eyeing Sandra, I was just thinking, you could finish that sentence, Sandra cut in, and then leave the pub voluntarily before I help you out with a mop. Lee laughed as if this was flirtation rather than a warning. Thank you for the shares. At a corner table, sick note Keith coughed loudly into his pint. Rough day, Keith? Dave asked. Doctor says I need a rest, Keith replied. That's why I'm not at work. You've been resting here since 1987, Vinny said. The door opened again, but this time the pub seemed to shift. Ken straightened up. Sandra stopped mid-bar wipe. Even lecherous Lee shut his mouth. A woman marched in like she owned the building. She was of indeterminate age. 60 had been some time ago, you'd guess. But you wouldn't dare to say it. Her coat was buttoned up tight, handbag clutched like a weapon. Her hair was immaculate. Her eyes were piercing, sharper than an eagle's. Linda, Vinny muttered, going pale. Dave turned slowly. That's your mum? The very same, Vinny said. Brace yourself. Linda scanned the pub. taking in the sticky floor, the dim lights, and Ken behind the bar. "So," she said loudly, "this is where you waste your life." Ken cleared his throat. "Afternoon, Mrs. Linda," she said. "Just Linda. And I'll have a gin and tonic. Proper measure, please." Ken nodded immediately and poured like his job and his life depended on it. Sandra leaned over to Dave. "I like her already." Linda's eyes landed on Scraps. "Is that dog meant to look like that?" "He's got character. And he had an encounter with a squirrel on the way here," Vinny said weakly. "He's got mange," Linda replied. "I'll book him a vet." Scraps stopped wagging his tail, ears flattening against his head. She turned to Dave. "And you must be Dave, the married one." Dave straightened. "Yes, Linda. Lovely to meet you. Carol keeps you in line, I trust." "Tries her best." "Good," Linda said. "Someone has to." Lecherous Lee slid closer. "Fancy a seat, love?" Linda looked him up and down with pure disdain. "If you were the last man on earth, I'd still not take that seat." Sandra covered her mouth, sniggering. Lee retreated without another word, beaten fairly and squarely. Ken watched her carefully. "Everything all right?" Linda took her drink, sipped and nodded. "Almost. Acceptable." "For now," Linda said. Then added, "But I'll be watching, Ken." Vinny slumped onto his stool. "She's only visiting for the weekend." Dave clapped him on the shoulder. "You'll survive." "She is enjoying her food, Rowena, yes."
Oh.
Rowena can obviously hear you eating.
No,
Hear the scrape of your fork. She is.
Rowena has like ears like a bat. She can hear everything.
She can. Sandra grinned. "Well, I hope she stays." From the corner, sick note Keith raised his glass. "Strong woman, that." Linda turned. "And you are?" "Off sick," Keith said. She narrowed her eyes. "Funny. You look well enough to work." Keith sank lower in his chair. "The munching rustler," says Jane. Let me just get some water. Outside, a train roared past. Inside, the thunder faded into a metallic sigh, leaving behind the familiar hum of the pub, the low murmur of voices, the clink of glass, the faint wheeze of the ancient fridge behind the bar. Linda perched herself on a bar stool as if she were taking a seat in judgment rather than comfort. Handbag placed neatly at her feet like a guard dog. Vinny watched her from the corner of his eye, shoulders hunched, pint untouched. "You're slouching," Linda said without looking at him. "I'm relaxing," Vinny replied. "That's what your father used to say before he ruined a perfectly good armchair. Now sit up." Vinny obeyed instantly. Dave leaned in. "I haven't seen obedience since, well, ever." Linda sniffed. "Marriage is about discipline, David. People forget that, particularly you." Ken let out a cautious chuckle, then immediately pretended he hadn't when Linda glanced his way. Sandra returned to the bar with fresh glasses. "So, Linda," she said, What brings you to the Longcroft? Someone mute that fool. I came to inspect, Linda replied. My son lives alone, keeps questionable company, and owns a dog that looks like it's been assembled from spare parts. Scraps bristled, then settled down and farted. And what do you think so far? Sandra asked. Linda surveyed the scuffed skirting boards, the crooked dartboard, lecherous Lee sulking into his pint. It's worse than I imagined, she said, but not without potential. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about this place, Dave murmured. Sick note Keith coughed again. Is that a real cough? Linda asked, or one of those decorative ones? Chest infection, Keith said. Had it years. And yet, here you are, in the pub. Fascinating. Doctor's orders. Then I'll be having a word with your doctor, Linda said. I enjoy puzzles. Ken slid another drink towards her. On the house. Linda raised an eyebrow. Why? Goodwill? She sipped. Accepted. That nod changed something. The pub seemed to exhale. So, Linda, Lee ventured. You here long? Long enough, she replied. And stop licking your lips when you speak, man. Lee stared into his pint. Vinny sighed. Mum, you don't have to interrogate everyone. I absolutely do, Linda said. This is your life. Someone has to take an interest. Dave raised his glass. To interest, then. They clinked glasses. Even Linda allowed herself a thin smile. Sandra studied her. You'd make a cracking landlady. Linda laughed sharply. Don't tempt me. I've run worse places than this. Looking after Hunter, Jane. Ken went pale. I'll see, Linda said at last. There's something honest about this pub. Rough, yes, but it doesn't pretend otherwise. Ken went pale. Scraps hopped onto Vinny's foot and settled there with a sigh. At least the dog knows where he belongs, Linda said softly. Outside, another train screamed past. Inside the Rampant Horse, Linda sipped her gin. Ken stood a little straighter, and for once, the pub felt properly supervised. So that is Linda's first encounter with the Rampant Horse. I think we'll probably